Hey, how you doing, folks? Nice to see you. Nice to see many of you last night at the meal, but also nice to see some of your legs. I haven't seen legs for the last 18 months, so I know you've got them, and it's good to see them. So, yeah, my name's Chris Speed. I'm going to do my best to, contain, explore, and extend a fireside chat with two new friends I've made in the last 24 hours, rather quickly, to begin to explore critical questions around ecosystem. We've got a bold title up there, but I think we've all agreed that actually it's a matter of understanding where you, and all of us sit within ecosystems. We all have agency, more or less. We're all subject to the power and the flow of those ecosystems. Some of them we probably feel are fairer, some of them less fair, but nevertheless, they're operating and you're trying to collaborate, translate, negotiate, survive. I've never known an ecosystem where it's win, 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 win. It seems an impossible myth, but nevertheless, there's value moving across all of your ecosystems and in increasingly complicated ways. Now, last year, just checking my mic here, the Scottish government employed or commissioned a report to review a particular ecosystem, and it is particular to startups and the tech innovation space. So some of you won't be necessarily bought into startups for data-driven companies and so on and so forth. But this one came out, and the Logan Review, commissioned and delivered by Mark Logan, who's the CEO of Skyscanner. If you've got the app, you'll know what Skyscanner does. It's essentially a data-driven organization that delivers through an app information on flights, availability and locations. Now, the review pointed at a few things across a particular ecosystem. And we've used that as a provocation, really, to then dive into what we think about ecosystems are doing, how you build healthy ecosystems, how you sustain them, where are the gaps and the challenges. So we're going to have a go at this. We've been rehearsing all morning, getting to know each other. Having said that, we've missed out on some of the other panels, so it might be this has all been covered. So bear with us. We also can't quite tune in to Hop In, wherever Hop In is in the metaverse. So if you're in Hop In, forgive us, but if you want to tag anything and tag us, please do, because we know the conversation will matter there as well, because you're in an ecosystem. So, look, I'm going to introduce myself and then ask colleagues to introduce themselves. Chris Speed, as it happens, Director of the Creative Informatics Programme, one of the clusters coming out of Edinburgh, and also work as a designer with informaticians, data scientists based in the School of Informatics in Edinburgh. So I'll go to Jessie.
Hi, my name is Jessica Driscoll, and I'm Head of Immersive Technology at Digital Catapult. I've worked in all parts of the immersive ecosystem, from startups through to BBC R&D, and then lastly at Digital Catapult. And we've also been working on the Audience of the Future programme as well, to help produce the Immersive Arcade and do research reports and to help support the demonstrator programme.
Richard.
And I'm Richard Williams. I'm the Chief Executive of Northern Ireland Screen, which is the local screen agency. We have been around for quite some time now, and as in terms of themes in this discussion, time I think is probably what I will come back to again and again. We're interested in the whole of the screen industries. I guess we came out of a more traditional space historically, but alongside, with the help of Future Screens, the universities and others, we're accelerating through the, I suppose, the latter stages of the digital transition, particularly through our engagement with virtual production on SMIL.
Great. So we're going to get going. Now, it's a bit awkward because we're going to try. I'm supposed to chair, but also I want to be in the conversation as well. So hopefully these guys will catch me out. But Richard, I'll start with yourself because you've been involved in the construction of an extraordinary ecosystem, let's say 15 years. But what are the jigsaw pieces that have made a difference for you in terms of that flow of value in lots of different forms?
Yeah. Well, I think, 15 years at least. Keep emphasizing the point. If you're, you can't deliver any of the sort of ecosystems we're talking about, any of the clusters, any of the virtuous relationships, dynamic relationships that we're talking about. If you have a 4-year, 5-year time frame, you really have to have policy development that is longer than that. and I don't know whether we had it at the start, but we have ended up, the primary reason that Northern Ireland Screen has been successful, and I think it has been successful and therefore has made a contribution in terms of growing the screen industries in Northern Ireland, is that we've had sustained support. And that sustained support is the key dimension. The second thing that we've had, which is maybe helped, and this will have come up lots of times in the sessions, I'm sure, but Northern Ireland's a small place that has limitations, but it also has advantages. Obviously, we have to play to the advantages, and Northern Ireland Screen, up to a point, has been able to pull together concerns about infrastructure development, concerns about education skills development, and concerns about what, for us, it would be described differently in sort of tech startup language, but for us, what is development financing and production financing of projects, and we've been able to always be thinking about how those things relate to each other, and that's absolutely critical.
Yeah. And you're getting that virtuosity, because the key to an ecosystem is they're virtuous. If they move into a vicious cycle, you get challenges, but you've got...
Yeah, well, we are now, but it's we're a long way into this journey, but we now are very we're like everybody else. We've got problems coming out over years, but we are very happy with the shape of the industry, the balance between inward investment, production. Titanic Studios is out the window. One of the directions, the big stuff. We still regard, what was originally Game of Thrones, but more recent times is, Netflix coming to town, Paramount coming to town with very, very large traditional physical production projects. We still regard that as enormously important, and we see that as like the anchor tenant for our sector and its visibility. But the key thing is that it's the anchor tenant, but it's only one tenant. What we're happy with is that, having had 15 years to build and seek to sustain an ecosystem, we have a reasonably developed fact-ent sector. We have a very successful children's and animation sector. We have a relatively fledgling but fast-growing games sector, with a interactive, immersive kind of mini sector sitting alongside that. We've got a TV drama sector and the independent film sector, all that have connections to each other. And to give a shout out to Future Screens, that forced cluster mechanism has helped significantly in allowing those, to some extent diverse, but to some extent interconnected and interdependent sectors, to see themselves as part of a whole. And I would say that's a work in progress. I'm not saying that everybody really thinks they're all in one big happy family, but which is why the clustering forces need to be sustained further. But we're now in a pretty good place.
Yeah, it's good. And critical to that, I'm so aware of this mic, it's going to jump off, isn't it? Jesse, you've at the Catabot, you've had to negotiate. Some of those agents in that network are about the large scale who might need continuous innovation. So that they're at scale, they haven't got the capacity to do R&D all the time. They've got their products, their services, they're out in the world, but they do need innovation. On the other hand, in that same ecosystem, you've got the startups that they might burn bright and then burn out. How do you reconcile those? Because there's challenges, there's needs across both parties.
There are challenges and needs across both parties, and I think that it's been a kind of continuous journey for Digital Catapult. So it's been kind of ecosystem building and connecting from programs like Creative XR and Augmentor, doing kind of challenge-led programs with larger stakeholders on the manufacturing side, for instance, to connect them with SMEs and startups so they understand the challenges of the journeys that both of them go through. And then most latterly, trying to set up the virtual production facility down in Guildford, which we've tried to create a mini ecosystem, I suppose, for advanced virtual production, where we've had an SME, Target 3D, Digital Catapult involved, Surrey University, and it's kind of no accident that it's in Guildford because of the proximity to the games industry. So again, you know, having that cluster together to be able to kind of learn from each other and access to that has really kind of helped on our journey. And that's also then been linked to the Studio UK working groups that we've been running at Digital Catapult. So again, you know, bringing large players like ILM in contact with small SMEs to help understand the challenges in that value chain.
And are they listening to each other? Because, I mean, there's ILM, right? And they don't need to listen to anyone, but they do. You know that the value in the ecosystem flows because it works, right? You've got to get the flow. Are you getting that?
I mean, I think up to a point, but I think all of these, you know, you're effectively a facilitating organisation to, you know, trying to grease the wheels, ensure the connections are there. And I think those facilitating organisations, Northern Ireland Screens, and you know, broadly in the same category, are tremendously important because, you know, people do, by inclination, and corporations by inclination, narrow their interests.
Yes.
You know, and I think, you know, just go back to that point that. You know, these ecosystems need to be developed and drawn out over a long period of time, and I do think all of these sort of quasi, you know, government supported but not government organisations are very important in stepping back from the individual interests of the you know, whether it's the big corporations or the startups.
I think the big players are listening. You know, the work that Pippa and her team are doing is really interesting, and you know, they're working very well with ILM. And I think that, of course, there'll always be difficulties with things like IP and data sharing. You know, where they won't listen and they'll do their own thing completely, and wall gardens, as we know, in immersive. But I think that the message is getting through, and I think that, you know, the UK is a really attractive place for them to do this kind of R&D because of the support systems we've got in place.
But again, I mean, it probably came up in an earlier session that we maybe missed, but the whole essence of SMIL and the vision for what it will be is to ensure access, you know, right across, not even just to small startup companies, but into outreach at school age. And you know, would companies, would ILM do that? I don't think so. I certainly the you know, production entities attached to US studios that we would be working for. They wouldn't build a facility that was equally as concerned with game startups as with facilitating their large scale production. You know, that's a policy construct.
Yes.
And I see it as, you know, a very important one. And for us, you know, SMIL is nearly a sort of physical manifestation of, you know, what I'm talking about in terms of that ecosystem beginning to see that it has a relationship, you know, right across the different the different screen sectors.
And that's what's in here actually, which is interesting. Probably the biggest takeaway, because it is specific to a sector, is talent/education. What's happening in your ecosystems in which you are confident talent is travelling and it's not extractive? Because I'm sure the big the big players are quite happy to cream off the failing startups, but on the other hand, we've got a whole bunch of education literacies going on, which I'm sure you're invested in, and then we can cascade that back through higher education, further education, and schools. Are you seeing evidence of investment through those infrastructures?
I think so, and it's interesting that you mentioned, the big players creaming off startups, because I used to work at a company called Inition that some of you might be familiar with, which was an experiential marketing agency that was involved with XR as a whole, so VR, AR, projection mapping, etc. And when Inition folded, a lot of people went on to form startups. They didn't only go and work for a big VFX company or someone else. So I think that it's not only the big players who benefit when a startup fails, which inevitably they will. People will go and do something else, because they've learned a lot, they've gained a lot, and they'll make the next step.
Yeah, I think, it's a long time ago now, but I think, on the tech and software side of things, so many companies came out of the collapse of Nortel, which was a big employer here. So there's no doubt that those are sort of classic points of disruption. And big companies collapsing is like quite a good moment for the creation of startups. But I don't think I'd be quite so... generally I like the Logan report. It has limitations. For me, it's focusing exclusively on tech startups, and obviously my area of interest is broader in the creative space. But it's very clear on the fact that interventions have to be over long periods of time, and that is my number one point. But its biggest action is around school level education, and the treatment or the lack of focus on computer science in schools. And I have a suspicion, to be honest, I know nothing about the system in Scotland, but I have a suspicion that the Scottish system will implement all of the other actions and not the one that is by far the most important.
You always had a great point to the fact. Mark Logan, it was, if you think of the triad, the hacker, the hustler, and the hipster, he's not a hipster.
Yeah.
And you're quite right also that the review tends to target comp size being a maths opportunity.
Yeah. Well, what I was saying, I would have gone further than the Logan report. He requests that computer science be put on the same level as maths and physics, to be taught at the same level as maths and physics. And obviously that would be, well, certainly in Northern Ireland, that would be a very significant step forward. But my view. It's not maths and physics because it needs to cascade right down into primary school. It's maths and English, and I think the irony from a Northern Ireland perspective is that a very long time ago, maybe 15, maybe 20 years ago, I don't know, there was an enlightened moment that realised a version of that and put maths, English, and I think it called it ICT. Unfortunately, not computer science, but put those as the three foundation skills for education. But it then fell away because the logic was developed that ICT could be taught through other subjects, and the Logan report is strong. And that it's such a nonsense. The idea that you could, which the same logic would apply. You could be taught English exclusively through other subjects. You could be taught maths exclusively through other subjects, but we prioritise those things in education to such an extent that you wouldn't dream of doing that. The same needs to happen on computer science, and that there's no doubt in my mind that would have by far and away the biggest impact, because again, the Logan report makes it's a sort of statement of the blindingly obvious. The earlier the interventions at the start of the process are the most impactful, because they impact on absolutely everything that comes afterwards. So if you change, if you radically change at primary and secondary school the teaching of computer science, the understanding of where computer science can take you, that point that was made about people want to make games but they don't want to do maths. I can sort of understand that, but you teach computer science earlier, people probably understand its application a bit earlier, especially if it's taught in an applied manner.
And you seeing the data literacies? Because I'm curious, when we talk about the literacies, and you mentioned this, are they digital literacies, data literacies, digital economy literacies?
I think it's all very confused, so I'll just give you a very practical example of related to what you just talked to. we've got an intern at the moment, and she sits in both teams, in the AI team and in the immersive team. And she had a plan to go to Edinburgh University to study computer science. And after working with us for a few months in the immersive tech team and the AI team, she's completely confused.
Wow.
So she doesn't know which path she should take now. Should I still do computer science? Will that be applicable? Will I be able to work in something like this? Should I do something more creative? And, that idea of the various literacies, is that a useful way for us to be thinking? Should we be redefining that? I'm not sure.
And I think, again, how are you getting on? Are you able to do, the startup community talks about build, measure, learn. Everything's about the data, because we desperately need to put something into the marketplace, measure its impact through analytics, and then learn. And that's hard to teach, and it's not easy to know whether that's economics or analytics or comp sci, which might be development, right? In terms of, we've also got challenges, though, in terms of talent, which is inclusion. We've spoke a little bit about just getting people in.
Well, again, one of the starkest things on the Logan report, and unfortunately I imagine it'd be pretty similar in Northern Ireland, is it has a stat that says, I think it's at undergraduate level, computer science undergraduate level is 85% male.
Yeah.
And you go, for the love of God.
Yeah.
And, that is not going to be, that is not harvesting talent efficiently, and that's a big concern. I was saying to you earlier, we see this play out, and it's the oldest cliche. It's very, very dominant in Northern Ireland, but it applies in most places. I have a neighbour who briefly flirted with career in tech startups, app development, computer science generally, and even though she had the opportunity to go on work experience to a very successful local company, when it came down to it, she still chose to do medicine, and you kind of go, it's not for me to I'm only her neighbour. It's not for me to overly influence her direction, but you see the level of talent, you see the inherent leadership that this individual had, and you go, the sky would have been the limit for you in that space, but for reasons that are still not that clear, you're choosing to go, extremely laudable, very challenging, very satisfying, more traditional route. Why is that, and how are we failing? I think the bit that I find interesting is she still made that choice. Now here, maybe she was right too. There's individual, but she still made that choice, even though she did have the experience of work experience in a company, with a mentor that she knew well. But still, she made that choice.
I suppose what's interesting here is the idea that the KPIs then, and I think the cluster's very good at this. You can tell us, but the KPIs are not necessarily at the bottom line. It's also about introducing KPIs which are social, cultural, and I'm hoping you've seen examples where those values have been core to co-constructing ecosystems. Help, Jessie. Are we seeing those?
I think so. When I worked on the BBC R&D project, Civilizations with BBC Arts, it was great to work on a project where the main impact wasn't reach. It was building these partnerships with the museums, leveraging what assets they had, helping them with digital skills. Getting everybody involved, and it was a very inclusive kind of project. So I think we are seeing projects like that. And when we're doing programs like Creative Exile, Mentor, working on Audience of the Future, it isn't the only KPI, and I think that even though some of those things are a little bit intangible, or people might not kind of build them in right at the start, I think they should be built in at the start. So, doing things like utilising a network of community partners, for instance, which we managed to get 40, and help to get them involved at an earlier stage, helps with those more intangible KPIs.
Another intangible, which I did like the conversation around glow, but each of you will have ecosystems with a glow, or you're trying to construct a glow. You've got a terrific glow, because, I'll have tuned into Nordic Scandi Noir a few years ago. Now I'm after what you've got in terms of Northern Irish drama and comedy.
Sure. Well, I think, I don't know if any of my colleagues are in the audience or not, but you know, if you're not London, LA, New York, you need a bit of luck along the way. Is sort of number one, and that, you know, obviously that's not something you can control, but what you can control is what you do with the opportunity that luck has provided you with. And I think, you know, our big moment, obviously, and I was in one sense dismayed, in one sense pleased that it's still being referenced. You know, Game of Thrones being shot in Northern Ireland was, you know, critical to the sense of what I described earlier as a glow. I kind of sense that there's something happening here, that it is plausible that the creative industries can be developed, that they can be the things that can be achieved that are of, you know, global significance, and, you know, even more than that, you know, the best in the world, and that is very, very powerful. And I think the key is to utilise, and what I think we've done quite well is to utilise that glow to and it's utilise it as a lever in terms of public funding and support from our departments to then build an ecosystem that works for startups, an ecosystem that works for games, an ecosystem that works for animation. You know, so basically to take the validation that you've got from the big stuff, and then to build underneath it. One of the things I don't agree with on the Logan report is that I can't see how we would ever have been able to do the sort of ground up building that we do if we hadn't had, you know, the big investment project to sort of validate the value of the screen industries. And for us, it sort of had to be that way around, because I don't think the government would have given us the funding otherwise.
Yeah, you need that
You
backing.
know, so yeah, and the Logan report's a little bit dismissive about the other thing. And here I think it's actually a very good report, but it's other limitation. You know, it's silent on social value.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
and it's
vacuous.
you know, and I think. I think it's a lot easier to see social value when you put the creative industries and tech together and beside each other. I think, you know, social value projects, social value inclinations kind of come out of that more strongly, and they because it's exclusively about tech startups, or well, maybe not, maybe it's not because of that, but that, you know, that report's pretty silent on our need to, you know, to not only grow value, but to grow inclusive value, and to ensure that it includes as many and as wide a cross section of our communities as it can.
I think it's interesting what you just said there about included, because the glow effect isn't only for screens in Northern Ireland, it spreads across everybody, and it's, you know, making people aware that they can bask and leverage that glow as well. Yeah. I think that's an interesting point.
Another critical part of I'm not sure R&D is a glow space, but it's a space where experimentation and risk-taking can take place. A healthy ecosystem has to be able to have a ceiling that is higher for R&D, right? And you've got a particular stance on that, because that's critical, isn't it?
Yes, I think it is critical, and I think that, you know, being able to do something rapidly, to fail, to learn from those failings, and to be able to then wrap that into the next thing very, very quickly is really, really important. Because even though I think that things do need sustained support over a long period of time, it's really critical that if an intervention isn't working anymore, to change it and not just keep that intervention going in the same form as it is over time. So, for example, Creative XR is a really good example of that. You know, it's been running for 3 years. We've taken a pause. We're looking at the learnings. You know, what is it going to evolve into? You know, the same thing with Augmentor. How can we make that, for example, not only immersive? How can we make it more cross-tech and involve 5G, IoT, you know, more infrastructure, and make it a more inclusive program?
Do we talk about failure very well in ecosystems? Because we need to.
I've always had the view that screen industries could deal with failure better than the sort of startup community, because it's so project dominated, and you just move on to the next. Okay, so your TV drama wasn't a massive success. You just naturally move on to the next one.
Yeah.
And that aspect is healthy. But somebody was pointing out to me yesterday that the right to fail is maybe not the right way to put it. The acceptance that failure is a big part of the system, and you shouldn't cringe and stop because of you've had a lot of companies that have collapsed and failed is absolutely correct. But in each instance and each company, you have to be demanding, especially us as support bodies and funders and whatever. You have to be demanding excellence and the absolute focus on success. You're not wanting. To me, one element of the right to fail would be back to the bad old days of some parts of the broadcasting community where people just kind of lazy about their projects. Just self-indulgent about their projects, not really that bothered about whether they were successful or otherwise. They just did them because they wanted to do them, and that's not what you want. So you want individual projects have to be demanding success until the point where they fail, and then you just have to move on quickly.
But I think you brought up a really interesting point, Chris, when we were having our discussion about, if you think about an immersive piece or whatever, an MVP or a product is a really, really big range. Is a paper prototype or working demo, and I've never ever been to a demo where there hasn't been a backup, a video, smoke and mirrors, just in case it doesn't work. Should we really be doing that? Shouldn't we be saying, okay, it doesn't work because X, Y, and Z failed, and this is why. Next time we're going to change it. I've never encountered that. It's always, it works.
It's so funny, isn't it? Yeah.
I think that the other thing that we've learned over the years, and it comes back to this, just sustaining support over time, is that I think in the early days we had this kind of notion, okay, we'll develop this perfect program for games startups or, kind of business skills program for fact-end companies that will allow them to crack international markets, and we'll do this one intervention over a couple of years, and that'll be it. They'll just kind of fly off into a sort of beautiful future, and it's just not like that. You need, again, the Logan Report's good on this. You need to have sustained, coherent, logical support. For basically every step of the process, and no company ever really gets beyond it. So it can never be a kind of one program hit. It has to be sustained over decades.
Great. I think we're out of time.
We are.
I think that was the Jesse, Chris and Richard show. So I hope there's something to take away there. It was quite tricky finding a space to go to in terms of ecosystems because they're huge. And 3 people with different agencies and spaces within them isn't easy to then summarize. But keep working on them. They're very hard. When you ever try to zoom out, I don't know what my microphone's doing now, but anyway, over to the chair.
Thank you very much indeed. Can we please put our hands together for this great panel? Thank you.
Thank you.